everyone.
Good morning.
Welcome once again to our Friends and Family Sunday celebration, Earth Day, Earth Sunday observance, and also the fourth Sunday after the
Easter.
after Easter, right? So many themes, and the challenge is how to put this all together. The children's reflection also reminds us of what is going on right now, no? When all these young people are literally leading all this movement in terms of, what is that, more regulation in terms of gun control issue. And I think our young people have spoken, in response to where the adults may have failed, or where the adults may be limited to some extent. And it is very clear that the young people really, they have that voice, and they are now in the process of really shaping and reshaping our realities today. So, are we part of that? Well, I'm still a young person here. The reading in Paul's first letter to the Corinthians, I think, speaks directly to our celebration today. Okay? Many parts, one body, many gifts, one spirit. And I think Paul has eloquently, articulated his message to the believers in Corinth. There was a reason for that. If we only focus on the reading, we could really say, wow, that is so ideal, that is awesome. It's really a celebratory kind of letter. But if we know the context of that, it's not really a cause for celebration at all. Because there were just too much tension and conflict within the church in Corinth, which prompted Paul to write that letter. And not only any kind of conflict, but the leaders were actually the ones who may have caused all these divisions. We have Cephas, and he was also able to have his own followers. There were members of the church of Corinth who were more into following Paul. We are for Paul, and others were to say, we are for Cephas. And some people were to say, we are for Christ. Can you imagine that? And they profess to be one. One body, and yet they are very much divided. This reflection actually reminded me of, again, like what I have said earlier, my experience last week. And I think it's not an isolated case, but the fact that my conference, the United Church of Christ in the Philippines, in Surigao, in Mindanao, and Dinagat Island, have finally confronted this reality and has brought the whole issue of trauma and healing out into the open. With all pastors, more than 200 delegates, pastors and church members, church leaders, community leaders together, exploring how the church may have been wounded, how the church may have been devastated, how the church may have been fragmented, and what this means in relation to our theme, which is doing Christ's mission in these changing times. To me, that was the most fulfilling part of the trip. Because finally, they were able to confront the ugliness of this part of the church reality. Finally, they were able to break the silence, because for many congregations, most of the conflicts were not really current conflicts. These are conflicts that have been in existence for years and years and years. Many times they have changed church policies. Many times they have changed pastors and church leadership and what have you. But many said the same conflict exists. And then I tell them, I'm not sure if that is really real conflict we're talking about here. Maybe it's a trauma of the past taking the form of conflict. That's why no matter how much the church will try to focus on the future, to focus on what lies ahead, but if the problem is the past, that past will always haunt us. And then the exchanging of narratives and pains and hurts, pastors and members just sharing their personal narratives, sobbing. And for many of them, that was the first time to finally express their grief over something that has been lost and taken away from them, I think, was part of the ongoing healing process of the church. I mentioned to them that maybe it's not really conflict that we are dealing here. Maybe it's not really conflict that's been affecting our church. Because the issues that people bring out into the open are issues of the past. They would say, we have been having this conflict. For example, 5 years ago, 10 years ago, I said, you know what? This is not conflict. These are traumas of the past that are taking the form of conflict. And there was also that challenge and acknowledgement of how difficult it was and has been for the church to proclaim the gospel, the good news, into the greater world when the church itself is very much fragmented. What is the cause of our celebration here? All the singing and the dancing, when we know that these are just sugarcoating, and these are just what people and what we want others to see to us. But deep down in the core of our being lies the real issues and problems. I think this is my point in our reflection this morning. I want us to celebrate this Friends and Family Sunday. You know, from the perspective, Friends and Family Sunday from the perspective of our own challenges as well, and maybe failures. It's like finding beauty in the ashes, not necessarily beauty in the midst of the garden of flowers and what have you, but finding beauty in the ashes, celebrating our unity, celebrating our coexistence, celebrating our togetherness beyond or against the backdrop, and being able to transcend where we may have challenges. I'm sure some of us have heard of this story, The Fails of Life. It's about 4 people. Everybody, somebody, anybody, and nobody. How many of you have heard of this already? I'm going to find the author for this. So there was an important job to be done, and everybody was sure that somebody would do it. Anybody could have done it, but nobody did it. And so somebody got angry about that because it was everybody's job. Then everybody thought anybody could do it, that nobody realized that everybody couldn't do it. It ended up that everybody blamed somebody when nobody did what anybody could have done. It sounds silly, really. But I think there's some truth to that as well, no? And how the story may have told us something about life and how we see ourselves in relation to others and in relation to our respective responsibilities as members of the same body. This very simple story may also be telling us about how we perceive others in accordance to our own personal biases. It's a story about assumptions and pretensions in the midst of service, which only results sometimes to disappointments and failures. Without any sense of responsibility and accountability, tasks may be left undone, and the community may remain in its static condition, and there might be no sense of growth and nature whatsoever that will take place on the part of the body. In this, our Friends and Family Sunday celebration, there are 3 points that I would like for us to reflect on. The first is our title. The title of our reflection, Many Parts, One Body, Many Gifts, One Spirit, is an affirmation, first and foremost, of our diversity. Here at Wellspring, it's just a very small congregation in terms of its membership. But in terms of the richness of what each person brings, especially at this very moment right now, with all our friends joining us in this celebration, we could really say that we are such a very diverse faith community. Not just in terms of the color of our skin, not just in terms of our nationality, not just in terms of our cultural backgrounds, but also in terms of the talents that we bring, the skills that we bring, our aspirations and our dreams that we bring and contribute towards the common goal. This whole idea of diversity sounds very, of course, ideal. No? Sometimes we tend to even romanticize it. But actually diversity at times could be threatening as well. Sometimes we always emphasize the notion that we rejoice and we celebrate our diversity. But we seldom look at diversity also as a source of tension and conflict. How to navigate ourselves within the differing elements and components and personalities and what have you that each one of us brings. That itself is a challenge. And so, our theme this morning, I would like for us to offer this before God also as a prayer. We are a diverse faith community, that's true. But as a Christian community, diversity is actually no accidental attribute to the body. It is of its very essence. So I think that is part of our mission, that is part of our calling. How to navigate around diversity. How to make sure that every element that we bring is celebrated, is utilized, and is being honored. Members of Wellspring, for example, we are into different fields of expertise and professions. We are rich in terms of our dreams and aspirations, of our stories and experiences. Such a very small community, but its presence is felt in the larger society where God has put us in. Hence, our quest for unity in faith and service is not a call for uniformity, which stresses sameness. Rather, it is an affirmation of our diversity in recognition of the sovereignty of the one true God, the source and giver of such talents and abilities. We delight and rejoice, not in sameness, but in differences and diversity. This is one essence of Christianity that Paul tries to highlight. Paul did not underestimate and undermine the differences of the Christian, the church in Corinth, but rather he actually acknowledges and honors their differences by using the analogy of the body. Paul did not say we are one, in terms of uniformity and sameness. No. Therefore, whatever strength you have, please share that and continue to extend that to the rest of us. The essence of unity lies in the fact that in the midst of our differences, we still are able to come together and share ourselves with one another and bring into our fellowship the richness of our diversity. Thus, our fellowship is further enhanced and enriched. In Wellspring, as a faith community that is so diverse, we want to continue honoring and celebrating the uniqueness and the particular uniqueness of each one of us. We are not trying to erase our particularities, by saying we are all one. Yes, we are one, but actually, no, we are different from each other. And we must acknowledge that. And then find ways on how to capitalize on this. Again, we delight and rejoice not in sameness or uniformity, but in diversity. Imagine a world where there is only one color. Imagine your house where there is only one color. That's the point. Imagine a party where there's only one food. All bread, nothing else. That would lose our appetite, actually. We delight in diversity. The second point of our reflection is that our title invites all of us to be one. While Wellspring UCC is a united and uniting church, let us also continue offering this to God as a prayer for us to sustain our oneness. Conscious of our diversity as a people endowed by God with various gifts, talents, and abilities, we can only long for unity in terms of faith and service. Being one in faith doesn't mean belonging to the same congregation or sect or denomination. Being one in faith means being together in living out the presence of God and God's teachings in our lives. Being one in faith means that as one body, we are all conscious of the presence of God in our lives and in the entire community, and how this God's presence in us manifests day to day. As Christians, we long to be one in our understanding of Christ's mission, although we differ in our mission expressions. We long to be one in serving God through various ways and possibilities. The third point in our reflection is that many parts, one body, many gifts, one spirit is also a call to a collective prayer for unity. Okay? So we have a celebration of our diversity. This invites us to be one, and then this calls us to continue offering to God our collective prayer for unity. It is an invitation to continue offering ourselves to God, who calls and invites us to come and live as a one big family. In the 17th chapter of the Gospel according to John, after praying for himself and for his disciples, Jesus also offers a prayer to God for all believers. He prayed that just as Abba is in him and he in God, the Father, the parent, all the believers around the world may be one. I quote, "My prayer is not for the disciples alone," Jesus said. "I pray also for those who will believe in me, that all of them may be one, just as you are in me and I in you." He further said that may they also be in us, so that the world may believe that you have sent me. I pray that they may be one as we are one. Who among us here have prayed the same prayer for and in behalf of the entire world? This is such a beautiful prayer. Jesus himself prayed for unity of all believers. And I would like to really emphasize this, the interfaith aspect of it. Not just believers in terms of people sharing the same Christian faith, but interfaith. Because to me, this is part of my statement of my theology, part of my theology. God reveals God's self in so many different forms, not just within the Christian tradition, but also in various other living faiths. My work in conflict resolution and trauma healing in all parts of the world gives me the opportunity to work directly with colleagues who are Hindus and Buddhists and atheists and agnostics and Shintos. And every time I see in them this goodness, their deep sense of commitment and compassion for the world to experience peace and healing, I would always ask myself the question, these people are not Christian, but where does this kindness and compassion, where do these come from? God can never be contained in just one religion alone. God transcends religious boundaries, and we must be able to see where God has been actively present and working in the lives of people, regardless of what living faith they may belong. God transcends the parameters of Christianity. And I would like to believe that this is part of the context by which Jesus' prayer was being offered to God, that the world may be one. Hence, our morning's meditation and our celebration today is actually in solidarity to Jesus' prayer and our way of living it out in our day-to-day relationship as members of this very community that is gathered here. Our coming together in worship and celebration is one humble form or one humble response to God's invitation to unity. Aware of the division and problems in relationship that the Christian community has experienced in Corinth, St. Paul introduces the fable of the body that was widespread in antiquity. Paul applies the image of the one body with its many members. He elaborates that the individual members of the community have their own proper functions and that these functions are not the same or interchangeable. If it is true that not all members of the human body can be eyes or ears, then it is also true of the Christian community that it needs many diverse gifts, but still remains one and the same body. Paul intends his readers to understand that in a well-organized body, different parts perform different functions. And since everybody has his or her designated or assigned area to perform, all are necessary, no matter how they may differ. I hope this is something that affirms and validates each one of us. The theological understanding of this is that it is the same one God who gives them all. The gifts and abilities are thus not to be set over against one another as though their possessors were rivals. Those who have them are to cooperate in working out the one divine purpose. Therefore, the diverse members of the body of Christ, whether a church or any Christian community or any faith community for that matter, should not be divided but should care for each other. Their functions and ministries must be used for the common good. Amen.